Hi guys, in this video I wanted to show you how I would draw a tiger's eye realistically in graphite. By all means, this is not the only way to draw realistically, but I just thought I'd share some tips that I personally would recommend if you're using graphite to make things look a little more realistic. So on the left here is the don'ts side and on the right is the do's side. So I'll take you through how I did both of them, starting from the don'ts and give you some tips on how to improve from there. I hope you enjoy the video. So I'm just going to start with some common mistakes and then I'll move on to what you can do to improve. So I'll just quickly run through the supplies that I'm using. From the top there's the General's Layout Extra Black Pencil, and then I've got 4 Derwent graphic pencils, a 9B, a 6B, a 3B and an HB. And then I have a Tombow Mono eraser, a standard Faber-Castell eraser, a mechanical pencil with 0.5 4B lead, a blending stump, and just a brush to brush away the excess erasing. So this first tiger eye only took me about 7 minutes to do in total. I was using a reference photo, but I definitely wasn't looking at it very much at all, so the initial outline is not accurate at all. I also started with a dark pencil and I pressed really hard for my initial sketch. So with the eyes, I've got the pupil directly in the center, which isn't the case for most animals or people. You'll find that it's off center or slightly higher, but directly in the middle makes it look very odd. I also go in and draw this perfectly round, really harsh highlight right on the top corner of the pupil. If you have a look at your reference photo, a highlight isn't usually a round dot like that perfectly on the top right hand corner of a pupil. And then straight away I'm going in with the darkest pencil I have, the 9B, to fill in the darkest areas, and I'm pushing really hard to try and get the pencil as dark as I possibly can. I'm also not paying attention to things like the waterline in the black ring that's around the eye. And a lot of people just think, oh, I know what the eye looks like. There's a black ring around the outside of the tiger's eye. And that's not the case. There are lots of different tonal values, and there's usually a highlight in the waterline around the eye. And I'm moving on to the darkest parts of the fur. I'm still using the darkest pencil that I have and pressing really hard. And I'm pretty much scribbling in the direction that the fur is supposedly going. I had a quick look at the reference photo and assumed that all of the fur was going in that one direction, instead of looking really closely at it and actually seeing that the fur can actually go in all different directions all over the entire face of the tiger. And now I'm going in with the middle tone and doing some shading on the eye here, and I'll be adding the same middle tone to the other parts of the fur, and again scribbling in a general direction, just guessing which way the fur is going based on a quick look at the reference photo. And here you can see that I'm fixing up my inaccurate sketch by pulling down the top lid of the eye. This is why it's really important to get your sketch accurate in the first place. You don't have to waste time trying to fix your mistakes halfway through your piece when you've already done quite a lot of detail on it. So as you can see, I'm trying to blend out some of my graphite that I've laid down. I've actually gone way too hard with my first layer of graphite, and when I'm trying to blend it out, it's not moving because I've pressed it too far into the paper rather than doing light layers. And another major thing that I did wrong with this piece was the tonal values. You can pretty much see I've got a really dark value, like the ring around the eye, the pupil and the dark stripes, and then I've got this mid-tone for the parts that I'm doing now, and then pretty much white for the rest of the fur. So rather than taking a close look at my reference photo and finding out where exactly all the different tonal values are, I've just chosen the darkest value, the lightest value and a mid-tone value right in the middle. But it's going to look a lot more realistic if you can take the time to notice all of the different values in your reference photo and include them into your drawing. Moving on to the second sketch of the tiger's eye, this one took me about 2 hours in total, so straight away I've gone and spent an extra hour and 53 minutes taking the time to build up the layers and create a more realistic piece. I've started with a very light and accurate sketch, and this is going to save me a lot of time further down the track because I won't have to spend time fixing up any mistakes that I made in my initial sketch. So I've just used an HB pencil to very lightly sketch in the darkest parts of the entire drawing. I've then used my blending stump to blend it out really smoothly. If you use a light pencil to start with and use it very lightly on your drawing and then blend it out, that's going to help fill in the tooth of the paper so that the next few layers that you do with your darker pencils are going to look a lot smoother than if you just went straight in with a dark pencil. If you do see any of the layer underneath, it's not going to be the white of the paper, it's going to be that middle tone value that you had laid down already. And now I'm going in with a slightly darker pencil. I believe this is the 6B. I'm still doing it very lightly, and because I'm not pressing very hard, it's going to make it a lot easier for me to blend that smoothly than if I'd pressed really hard and burnished the paper straight up. At this stage of the drawing, I don't need to worry too much about the detail of the direction of the hair. I just got to make sure that it is going in the general fur direction when I'm laying down these layers. I'll concentrate on the final detail a bit more when it comes to the last couple of layers. So I'm going through with the blending stump again, and I will continue to layer in this process of really light layers, not burnishing the paper, and then blending through with the blending stump to make it look a bit more smooth. Creating many layers to get the darkest tonal value is going to look a lot more realistic than going straight in like the left hand side. So I'm starting to use the General's layout and the mechanical pencil just to go in with a bit more of the detail in the last few layers. So you can see here I'm really taking the time to make sure that every little part of this drawing looks like the reference photo. So I'm actually spending more time looking at the reference photo than I am looking at my own drawing. This will ensure that it's going to look a lot more realistic. And you can already see in the ring around the eye, I've started to put some of those highlights. It's going to look a lot more detailed and realistic as I move on, but I'm definitely seeing those in the reference photo and including them into my drawing. You can also see the highlight on the eye isn't a little round dot on the top right hand corner of the eye. It's actually extending across the top of the eye. You'll be able to see that a bit more as the drawing progresses. I'm paying a bit more attention to the shadows, especially on the eye. On the top of the eye there's quite a dark shadow, and it's because the eyelid hangs over the top of the eye and is creating that shadow. So it's little things like that that you have to look out for when you're looking at your reference photo. And I'm using my dirty blending stump to actually fill in some of the white areas on the fur. I never actually clean or wipe off my blending stumps because it actually makes it easier to get those really soft tones in places like white fur if I just keep it dirty and use it like that. Instead of trying to go in with a really light pencil, it's just much quicker to use the blending stump for that. And you can see here that I'm using the Tombow Mono Eraser to pull out some of the individual hairs and clumps of hairs, especially within the white fur. And it's starting to look a lot more realistic now that I'm paying attention to all these different directions of the fur growth. And I'm using the mechanical pencil because I find that it gets sharper than any of the standard graphite pencils. So you could use this to fill in all of the tiny little details, and I especially use it around the areas that I've just erased with the Tombow Mono Eraser, just to accentuate some of the white areas that I've pulled out with the eraser. So now you can see that highlight a little bit better. I haven't left it completely white like the one on the left hand side, and it's also this really weird horizontal kind of shape that comes across the eye rather than just being in one little round dot in the middle. Another tip to stop your drawing looking grainy is to make sure that you're using sharp pencils. And I talk about the tooth of the paper quite a lot, but if you're using sharp pencils you can get into all the little grooves of the paper rather than skimming across the surface with a blunt pencil. And this way you're filling in all of the little gaps with graphite and you won't be able to see those little white bits showing through like you would with a blunt pencil. So I went back with the blending stump again just to soften out any of the harsh lines that I made with the mechanical pencil or the Tombow Eraser. And now I'm going back in with that Tombow Eraser again to continue pulling out all the clumps and individual bits of fur. It's only now when I'm in the last couple of layers that I start pushing hard in the areas that I want the darkest. And this is where I spend the most time looking at my reference photo and comparing it to my drawing, just to make sure I've got all the darkest values correct and all the lightest values correct, and any little changes that I might want to make. So the biggest tips that I can give you to make your drawings look a bit more realistic is to spend the time creating more and more layers rather than trying to go in dark straight away, and spend that time looking at your reference photo and checking that your values are correct, and spend that extra time making sure that your initial sketch is accurate. So if you liked the video, please consider subscribing or give it a thumbs up. If you have any feedback or questions, I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below. If not, I will see you in the next video.